Hello and good morning. My name is Richard Miller, and I'm the guy that runs the Never Not Here website, and actually have a television presence for 5 years. And whether that's important to me or important to those that get a chance to watch it. I'm not living in Chicago anymore, or haven't been for 9 months, and so whether I'll keep that up or not, I don't really know. But Never Not Here is based on me sharing parts of my life or what happens in my insight and my awareness about myself and about the world I live in. And why I do that, I don't know if I can go into that right now. You know, what are my motivations? Or on the surface it just seems like it's not that hard to do. And so then I feel like I should continue it. And I try to share things that I find and what seems important to me and what seems that could make a positive effect on those around me, which you are one of those that are around me, even though I may not know you. And without getting too long-winded about it, a couple times I've read to you, and so I thought I would go back and try to read something that seems really mind-expanding, right? And in this case, you know, like I feel, okay, when we are exposed to material, we have a mechanism that can say, yeah, I agree, or no, that's all wrong, right? And somehow I feel like that's the value of a spiritual teacher, or even what we call a master, is somehow they're able to articulate things that we've maybe known, because if we haven't known it, we're not going to be following them or listening to them or contacting them. And so then the book that I want to read to you from is something like that, where this lady articulates what I think I've been discovering for some time, you know, maybe for some time or maybe just last week. But in fact, I'm reading it more than once, and the second time and the third time are deeper insights, and so I must be discovering these things just as we speak. And so then I'm not really adopting this as a teaching, but I'm just saying that it's almost, wherever you open this book, it kind of hits me directly square between the eyes. And so then I thought, well, why not open it at chapter 1? And so I'll show you the book. The name is Freefall. And this is a New Zealander, and I kind of heard of her when I was in New Zealand, but I didn't see her. She was in Auckland, and I was in the South Island. This is what the book likes, and her name is Sally Anderson. And I would hope someday maybe to meet her, or maybe to speak with her. And like I say, I could almost just open the book anywhere and just start reading, and I think you'd agree that you'd be blown away, but I'm just going to start in chapter 1, and I'll switch glasses here so maybe I get a better view of it. And let's take off. So the name of chapter 1 is Your Life in Default? Are you living your life by default or by design? The default, I mean, is the disempowered way so many of us learn to think and feel about ourselves based on our culture, our beliefs, and values adopted from our teachers, peers, and the family in which we grew up. Most of us are disassociated from the emotional pain and the default inflicts and how it governs our lives. I'm not talking about the pain that comes from injury, sickness, or the sadness that accompanies a divorce or the passing of a person we love, but about the pain deep inside each of us that drives our less than beneficial behavior, restricting our enjoyment of life and limiting our potential. It's the heaviness, the weariness of spirit, and the cry of the heart for fulfillment that I'm speaking of. We live in a world where most people have no idea they are living from a default identity, and no idea they are unconscious of who they really are. They don't realize there's an entirely different person at their core than the person they think they are. I choose not to operate from my default perspective because it doesn't empower me. I don't believe it's anything like our true nature. As a matter of fact, I believe our default identity only has the existence that we give it, because it's nothing more than a construct in our head. It's a subhuman way of existing that has nothing to do with living as a real human being whose fundamental nature is unconditionally loving. So then that's her discovery. Now, I don't think that we're supposed to believe that we're unconditional loving, but that's just how she says it at that point. When we operate from our default identity, we are largely cut off from our loving essence. I believe it's possible not only to access our essence, but also to live from it on a continual basis. And that's something that not very many of us are open to examine. We just say that life comes as it comes, and that our job is to accept it, and that we really shouldn't put our hands on it. We make a mess every time we put our hands on it. I learned through extreme circumstances how even the most degrading of human behavior, in which terrible atrocities are perpetuated against us, doesn't have the final say. Devastating though such atrocities may be at the time, they have no abiding reality, and therefore no ultimate ability to define us because they don't originate in our essence. Isn't that beautiful? No abiding reality. It's their past memories. They're not here now. They have no abiding reality. I mean, that's a beautiful way to say it. There's something much more enduring and ultimately far more powerful than the worst humans can do when they believe in ways that are completely foreign to their true nature. In this I speak as an authority. Indeed, I am my own authority because I have plunged to the depths of degradation and found this place to have no substance. I know that our essential nature is unconditional love. Intrigued? Read on. So now she's telling us she has some authority and she's plunged to the depths. You know, many of us think that we've had a tough life. And maybe we still think we have a tough life. But the only basis of her sharing is that she came out the other end and she saw that it had no substance. And so then that's really what we all want to know, is that we're not locked in. There's no substance in what's ricocheting through our bodies, our feelings and our thoughts, through our minds. There's no substance in those either. And intrigued? Read on. When we live in our default identity, love is always conditional. That's because this lower level of consciousness is based on fear. Fear has to do with ego, which someone has rightly dubbed edging God out. In contrast, high-level consciousness is connected to source, which is love. This source is our true being. When we function from our true being, we experience nothing but love. We become a person who is so different from anything that we have ever known ourselves to be that we are all but unrecognizable. So these are promises of what we're going to read and what we're going to find out and what we can find out about ourselves. I'm kind of brought myself to not really take promises as too important. It's an image that's not here now for those that don't have that image. You know, if I don't feel like I'm unconditional love right now, then I don't feel like it. And if somebody says I am, and that's a promise or a testimony, and I tend to leave it like that. You know, I don't really try to say, oh yeah, read on, that's what I want. I'm not reading for a fulfillment of a promise. I'm reading to kind of sink into who I am, and I think, and be responsible for that. And that's what I'm trying to share with reading this chapter, or reading these pages. There are always two contexts for everything, one that's empowered and one that's disempowered. The default that I'm speaking of is disempowered context. I'm referring to a way of approaching life learned from the past, but that no longer serves us. I've had the privilege of coaching many professionals throughout my career. Most coaches don't know about their own default, which renders them unable to recognize when their clients are in default. Is it any wonder we continue to have so many disempowered people in spite of all the counseling and coaching that has arisen in modern times? Imagine if coaches, counselors, psychiatrists, social workers, anyone who has had the privilege of enhancing the human condition, were armed with the insight into their default and how it disempowers, in addition to what they already know. We would end our oscillation between feeling empowered and disempowered. At last able to sustain an empowered state, we would live up to our potential. Sustain. Well, that's a key for Sally Anderson. What real transformation is. Following a workshop in which I had asserted that our lives can be unrecognizably transformed, an extremely intelligent man in his mid-40s asked me, how can we be unrecognizably transformed? If we were unrecognizably transformed, we wouldn't recognize it. When I speak about unrecognizable transformation, I'm saying we die to our default level of identity. This isn't an intellectual concept. It's an experiential occurrence. It's akin to the metamorphosis a caterpillar goes through when it becomes at first a chrysalis and then a butterfly. A single life flows through different stages of its existence, but each stage is a radically different experience from what the caterpillar originally knew itself to be. So it is with us. We're the same person, and yet totally different. Metamorphosis involves the death of sorts. The transformation of the caterpillar into the chrysalis symbolizes the death we each have to go through in order to become free of our default identity. When the birth of the butterfly from the chrysalis symbolizes our emergence into an entirely new quality of consciousness. Transformation is fundamentally different from self-improvement. Later in the book, I'll illustrate the difference from my own life. I was a walking trigger, but being triggered was causing me so much pain that I felt like I was dying inside. Still, I imagined that if I could just apply all the information I was receiving from the countless courses I took, books that I read, and audio programs I listened to, I would become free of pain. However, no matter how many avenues I tried, I was unable to sustain most of the changes I attempted to make. I told myself that I believed in the teachings of my latest spiritual teacher. I would be a changed person. If I applied a certain set of principles, I would be different. If I followed a particular spiritual or religious path, I would be transformed. Yet after years of courses, I wasn't transformed. I was still a walking trigger. Conformity is the opposite of presence. There's a widespread notion that unless we follow a certain path, we can't access the holy grail of consciousness of our true being. This is a dangerous belief because it leads to control and conformity, which are the antithesis to becoming fully aware and present in our moment-by-moment existence. People imagine that an individual who is conscious of their true self and living from their authentic being should act in a certain way, instead of recognizing that consciousness can be expressed in a myriad of forms. Many of us feel pressured to fall in line with this expectation of what a conscious life is supposed to look like. If we don't conform, we feel we aren't spiritual, but there's no should or ought to authentic spirituality because such rules violate the essence of what it is to be real, which is the hallmark of spirituality. To be conscious and therefore free to be who we really are instead of being driven by past hurt isn't to hold a set of concepts on how a free person acts. A conscious person doesn't smoke. They eat in a certain way. They dress in a certain way. They use certain words when they talk. None of this has anything to do with consciousness. It's just a mask, a pretense of spirituality. Consciousness isn't a cookie-cutter culture in which one shape fits all. What might work for you will not work for me. There are many, many ways of experiencing authenticity. The right to determine the course of our life is ours and ours alone. If we choose to adopt a behavior that doesn't serve us, such as smoking, that's our right as a free person. For this reason, we pay no attention to the person who challenges, "How can you possibly be spiritual and smoke?" or "How could you possibly be spiritual and drink?" While we can't be conscious and willingly harm others, it doesn't mean we live our life trying to fit into the picture people create of what a conscious person ought to act like. If an individual manifests a degree of default behavior alongside their emerging consciousness, the spiritual person manages the default behavior as something separate from the individual's essential being. It's crucial not to collapse the behavior into who we imagine someone is. Spirituality, consciousness of our own authentic being, is just embracing what is. A transformed existence is one in which we embrace freedom moment by moment. Experientially, as the free flow of life itself, which is fundamentally different from abiding by a set of mental concepts. In other words, to be spiritual means we embrace the whole of our being, showing up in all our magnificence. But if it were this easy, surely everybody would be experiencing it, wouldn't they? Consider the number of people who are searching for fulfillment and not finding it. It would seem it must be a secret only a token number grasp. However, I discovered that nothing could be further from the truth. Everybody can experience a wonderful life in which they don't hurt anymore. Whoa. The tendency to complicate what it means to be spiritual is rooted in our need to avoid actually being spiritual, which I repeat is just to be real and to experience presence in each and every situation. We like to keep things complicated because our default identity can't grasp the present, being present with a person or a particular set of circumstances and allowing consciousness to guide us from moment to moment. In order to continue in our confusion, in which, as we shall see, we have an investment, we embrace concepts of what spirituality is supposed to be instead of simply being conscious. So she says we got a responsibility there that we want to continue our confusion so that somehow we can not face what we're creating in our life. We can say we don't know what we're creating, or we don't know that we're creating it. We're confused about that. And so then there's a payback to that confusion, that we can just be silly and stupid. And let's just see what she says. To finally arrive at experiencing the answers to life as very straightforward would eradicate the need for the vicious cycle of self-improvement so many of us engage in. Instead of life being a struggle to improve ourselves, it would become a spontaneous unfolding of each individual's potential, a flourishing of who each of us is in our uniqueness. To embrace our unique expression of consciousness means we're going to dress differently, speak differently, behave differently, choose a path in life that will be different from anyone else's path. Why would our path be different from everyone else's? Because when we're true to ourselves, we live from our source, which is infinite in its diversity. Just look at the world of nature, or at the vast array of galaxies. It's obvious, spirit delights in pouring forth a torrent of variety. And we don't even need that. We don't even need to look somewhere else and say, well, other things have variety, and so that we're authorized to be different. But if you need an excuse, then just follow that. I mean, in some cases, it's useful to make up a distinction of why and where and how. And in other cases, all distinctions and all descriptions and all justifications and all reasonings are actually what hold us away from our potential. And I think she arrives at that, in a real clear way. Sally Anderson is kind of an amazing person. and has a kind of a tough part to her story, which she leaves till the end of her book, which I think is a good idea, because it's really reading what, about her ordeal is, for me, it probably would have diverted my attention from really what she says. And so then, let me just continue here a little bit. Why we can't make the teaching work. As long as I was doing things the precise way a particular methodology advocated, my life oscillated between moments of happiness and times of extreme misery. I enjoyed some semblance of happiness, but it lasted only as long as I applied the method, and even then it worked only partially, just enough to keep me going back for more teaching and more training. Why couldn't I make the teaching work? Because I was trying to create for myself a reality that wasn't possible. A person who's coming from their default identity simply can't live a transformed life. It's as impossible as it is for a caterpillar or a chrysalis to fly. Having said this, let me reassert that I believe in radical transformation, to the point that we become unrecognizable from our default perspective. Hence, whenever people tell me, which they often do, it's not possible to be that transformed, I respond, that's a belief. If you can believe that you can be transformed, you can. But if you believe that you can't, you can't. Such a belief is part of our default identity, a product of the way we've grown up. It has nothing to do with our authentic self. By authentic, I mean the person that we are in our essence, the person we were before we learned that to be real wasn't acceptable. We have all adopted a pseudo-identity in conformity to, or in rebellion against what we believe those who were significant in our life expected of us. Yeah, I have a whole take on that, that our first use of language was somebody overlaying an image from the outside onto us, saying you could be like that, you could do this, be a good boy, clean up your room, right? And then those external images, for a while our use of language was to fulfill those external images, and then for a while our use of language was to rebel against those external images. And many of us have never known any use of language other than resistance. And that's very weak. That kind of language is very weak. Well, that's my deeper analysis, but I won't get into that right now. In our essential being, we have always been unconditional love. This is what we have the potential to become in every dimension of our everyday life. However, even though we were born unconditionally loving, and this continues to be our core state, in our default self-understanding, we are completely unconscious of unconditional love. This is because all we have ever experienced is love that's conditional. It's a reward. It's a reward and punishment system, is what conditional love means. And it's just business. The business of raising a child, the business of relating with your associates. It's all a manipulation. You do this and I'll do that. And if you don't do this, and then I'll try to make all hell break loose. And hence, when unconditional love begins to arise in us, it can feel strange and even frightening. We're afraid to allow such a powerful love to infiltrate the person we exude, because it would mean the collapse of our default identity, which is the only sense of self with which we are familiar. I want to emphasize that although unconditional love feels strange at first, we actually yearn for it, because we were born unconditionally loving, but have forgotten what it feels like. It's a case of remembering. Because it's so important to grasp the difference between our authentic being and our default identity, let me repeat what I said earlier, that when someone says it isn't possible for us to be transformed to the point we are unrecognizable, this is actually accurate from the perspective of our default identity. This is why the death of who we have known ourselves to be is essential. if we are to experience transformation. Transformation requires a death. Most self-development programs I know of teach people to manage their different states, not how to die altogether to their default identity. A high percentage of spiritual paths also teach we can only be empowered if we believe in something other than ourselves. Though there are spiritual paths that talk about looking within, even these tend to point to the reality other than who we are in this moment, or who we appear to be to ourselves in this moment. They all actually point to somewhere else other than who we appear to ourselves to be, and set up an external ideal, which is the same use of language when we were babes. External image, and not pointing to what is our commitment to ourselves. What do we stand for? What is our passion? What is our interest? Let's just be the authors of some of this conditioning. Let's say we're a conditioning machine that operates on beliefs, and then how about if we're the author of some of these beliefs? Well, let's just see what she says. I'll repeat that sentence. Though there are spiritual paths that talk about looking within, even those tend to point to a reality other than who we are in this moment. And I said who we appear to be. This is because at the core of these teachings is the idea that there's an ultimate real reality. That's the place we'll finally arrive if we faithfully follow their program. So that's a beaut, that there is a reality beyond what we can see. And so right away, that is an abstraction that we have to kind of try to mold ourselves into. And that I don't know, I call that a defect. The promise is that it's going to be better than where we are right now. We're assured that if we rely on spirit, either an external spirit or what many refer to as the spirit within, in the way particular teaching defines the spirit, will eventually arrive. If you look at all the people who follow a teacher, they are being offered an empowered state based on believing in this particular teacher's path. If they don't believe in the teacher's way, they're told that they won't experience this empowered state. It's a vicious cycle, keeping an oscillation between being empowered and disempowered going on interminably. In this sense, it's an addiction, with alcoholism, drugs, gambling, sexual addiction. In fact, any addiction, we're looking to something external to make a difference in our life. Even when we talk about our higher power, many of us are looking to something other than who we are right now in ourselves. As long as we believe that one day, if we follow certain principles and believe certain concepts, things will be better, we will oscillate between functionality and dysfunction. I never found any of these paths sustainable because while they facilitate a measure of improvement, they keep the paradigm of our default identity in place, which is disempowering. How can we experience transformation of dysfunctional aspects of our life when we operate from our default identity, which is by its very nature is incapable of undergoing a metamorphosis? Our default identity prefers self-improvement, which is why everyone is looking for an empowered state through some technique or other. Most of us are unwilling to pay the price of actually experiencing an empowered state, since it requires the death of the person we believe ourselves to be. Because this is a frightening experience for an ego-based identity, we prefer to seek transformation from some source outside of ourselves. But to really change, we have to let go of self-improvement, let go of trying to fix ourselves, and quite simply die to who we think we are. She repeats that quite a few times, and I don't know if she's telling us how to die, or if that's just going to be obvious to us, or what happens if we have to die to ourselves. But it proves to be a powerful book. Let me say this again because it's pivotal. The conscious journey isn't about becoming a better person. It's about dying to the person we have believed ourselves to be and waking up to who we really are in our essence. Unless we are prepared to die to everything we have known ourselves to be, we will forever oscillate between functional and dysfunctional behavior. So she's just saying dying to what we know and waking up. In other words, we don't have to mock it up, what we're supposed to be. Just the very dying to what we are, and whatever's left over, the residue, the pure, clean residue, is who we are. And I think that's, that's liberating. It's powerful and liberating. When I look back now, I realize that the systems I studied and tried so hard to make work actually kept in place the paradigm of oscillation between being empowered one minute and disempowered the next. They enabled me to avoid having to be responsible. Any kind of a reason is an avoidance of your own, not responsibility, let's just say your own opportunity to create your own life. Any kind of a reason. Just absolutely any. And that's why not knowing is the highest spiritual state, because there's no reasons in not knowing. And so anything is possible, you can create anything. They enabled me to avoid having to be responsible for my own emotional and mental state, and consequently I continued to seek change of circumstances to make me feel better. In contrast, when we die at the level of our default identity, it's the end of all oscillation. Can you imagine actually experiencing the end of all oscillation? I'm talking about the ability to sustain an empowered state. To illustrate, let me share a story I read some years ago. A hunter goes into a jungle and captures a parrot. Crossing to the other side of the jungle, he puts the parrot in a cage. The parrot isn't stupid. It knows that it's going to escape the cage. If it's going to escape the cage, it needs to control the hunter, enroll the hunter to teach it to speak English so it can communicate. This done, the parrot says to the hunter, "You have been so nice to me. Would you do me a favor? Go to the other side of the jungle and find my best friend and tell him that I love being in my cage and there's no need for concern." The hunter feels this is the least he can do, so he finds the parrot's best friend and delivers the message. The parrot's best friend promptly drops dead, and the hunter is terribly confused. When the hunter reports what happened to the parrot in the cage, this parrot also drops dead. Now the hunter is doubly confused. He puts his hand in the cage, picks up the parrot, and tosses it into the garbage heap, whereupon the parrot flies up into the tree. The hunter says to the parrot, "You tricked me," to which the parrot responds, "My friend was sending me a powerful message." Asks the hunter, "What's the message?" Says the parrot, "That I must die in the cage as I know it to find the freedom to fly." When we die at our default level of identity, transformation becomes sustainable. We can then increasingly choose to live from our true identity, which is empowering. It's empowering because it's grounded in our infinite source. Moment-by-moment choice. This is really good because we think we can choose once, right? Choose Jesus. I chose him a long time ago, right? So, moment-by-moment choice. Choose to be a non-smoker, Yeah, I chose that last year. I think you have to choose in every second, in every minute you have to choose not to take a puff, right? And then you're a non-smoker. So all this stuff happens in real time. It doesn't happen in your memory. Like, okay, that's my bit. If we are prepared to surrender our default identity so we can evolve to our full magnitude, our potential is tremendous. However, if we are interested in evolving consciously toward our potential, many variations of that death process are required to bring us to new levels. Transcending our egoic identity isn't just a one-time individual experience. We are involved in nothing less than transformation of the human species. Once we have this framework of understanding, it's moment-by-moment choice to live in awareness. So many of us are either out in the future creating a world that's not yet here, or we're in the past regretting and resenting, none of which has anything to do with our real self. I'm not offering people a world in which
in a future-based paradigm, life will be better. I teach people to take responsibility moment by moment for their state of being, right now. I'm talking about shifting into an entirely different state based on our authentic feeling of self. For this reason, it's critical to make the shift in what we are committed to experientially, in contrast to analytically and intellectually. If we only get it at a head level, we don't integrate it. And we don't have to integrate it if we're ever, and we do have to integrate it if we're ever to sustain it. We simply can't do this at a mental level. For instance, a person tells themselves, I hate being an alcoholic, so I want my life to be different. I just can't stand being this way. My response is, you might say you hate it at a conceptual level, but at a feeling level, you don't hate it, you love it. If you really hated it, you wouldn't have take another sip. That which we feed reveals what we are really committed to. That which we feed reveals what we're really committed to. And what we feed might be our past hurts. Or what we feed might be our story of being abused or having a hard childhood or having stern parents. And that's what we're committed to, is to fulfill that image and dramatize it to the world. And this is, totally different than saying that this past is a real experience. She started out right away saying that there's no substance to it, and it's only what we're recreating in this moment. Each moment of each day, we get to choose which state we wish to live in based on how it makes us feel. The trouble is, most of us really don't know what we are committed to because we are disassociated from our feelings, which means we can't make a wise choice. We don't know what we're committed to, so therefore we can't emulate. We're committed to just woo-woo land, just to be in a cosmic cloud. We're committed to not knowing. So then confusion is the most important element in our life. And then standing back from that confusion in what we call resignment, right? And dulling. We're all so happy to be dull and to be victims. And I don't know, is this hard for you to hear? Is this hard for me to say? I don't know, I'm actually proud of the discovery. I mean, I'm so happy that I've discovered that, and I feel like sharing it. I don't know whether that hits you as another kind of a victimization, another guy bullying and trying to tell you how you are. I don't know, just try it on and see if it's true. And come out and live life more electrically. Having said this, it's important to point out that most professionals that deal with trauma address what they call a person's feelings, but they are generally dealing with the default reactive emotions, not the true feelings of the heart. Sometimes people who don't recognize the distinction between default emotions and the true feelings of the heart say to me, "But Sally, you're denying my feelings." I respond, only your default emotions. Feelings are different. Look at a rose and experience the full wonder of its beauty. Enjoy to the hilt the love of a partner. Be filled with joy by the cooing of a newborn baby. Thrill to the excitement of a great adventure. Bask in a compliment from a stranger. All of these invite the loving center out of our being to blossom. They evoke feelings that manifest who we really are, feelings that are empowering. When we're unaware, we don't delineate between default-based emotions of our disempowered state and the power-based feelings of our empowered state. Instead, we react to life. By react, I mean that when something happens, the mind goes through 4 phases. First, we recognize, then we evaluate, then we experience a sensation, and are subsequently triggered into a reaction. Recognize, evaluate, experience a feeling or sensation, and then triggered into a reaction. This reaction usually happens in a heartbeat and is always disempowering. Reaction is just kind of like a memory of an old, well, we could call it a wound, but that personalizes it too much. Another way to look at it is just part of the collective. It's a collective challenge. And at some time in our past, that collective challenge resonated or bobbed to the surface in our experience. And so we personalize it and say, and that was our experience, but it was just some collective emotion and collective way to respond. And we were responded to by some, I don't know, I just find depersonalization is way more powerful. The irony is that when we are aware, our default-based emotion becomes the access point for collapsing the past and future mental projections and shifting to awareness of the present moment. In other words, emotional reactions and the pain they cause are what ultimately train us to live in the now. So then, she's not trying to suppress our default reactions. She's just saying, wow, look, they're the access point. You can feel them, you can find them. And then you can collapse the past and collapse future-based mental projections. They collapse. You don't even do it. But just by using that access point and noticing, hey, that's not here. To help clients feel, I request they produce a photo of themselves between the ages of 3 and 5. I encourage them to look at this photo and re-presence themselves to who they were before they shut down. So to find a photo when you were just a bubbling child and see if you can re-presence yourself. I haven't done that. I have a photo like that, but not here. Not in Australia. I witnessed how powerful this simple exercise can be from the case of a CEO who I asked to reconnect with a photo of himself as a little boy, age 4. This was a hard-nosed, unemotional, extremely cynical businessman who thought it was ridiculous that we were entertaining his process. Nonetheless, when he pondered the photo of himself, he burst into tears. That's moving right there. Just to say that. He realized what a huge betrayal his life had been of who he really was. About 3/4 of my clients have a similar reaction. Once we realize that our true being isn't the same as our default identity, we no longer feel this false identity because we realize it doesn't serve us anymore. I misread that. We no longer feed this false identity because we realize it doesn't serve us anymore. Having said this, I want to emphasize that as destructive as it is, our default identity is actually a safety mechanism that needs to be acknowledged for its role in having protected us during the years we were unaware of our true being. I will illustrate how this works in my own life in due course. In the meantime, it's important to recognize that at each stage of our journey, we're doing the best we could for which our default identity was responsible. If everybody came from their true being instead of their default identity, we would have a transformed world in which unconditional love is a mode of being in every respect of life. The only reason it doesn't happen is because too few of us believe it's possible, and even fewer of us are taking a stand for it. Taking a stand. So that's something in Sally Anderson's book too, about what you're willing to take a stand for. It's called Freefall. Leading life beyond the edge. And that's Sally Anderson. I guess she's international in her fame and how she works. And she's, as I understand it, she lives in Auckland. And I'd like to meet her, and I would like to talk with her online. And who knows, maybe I'd like to go to Auckland and take one of her trainings. And it's kind of amazing how I found her too, because it was, not with intention. A lot of what I'm talking about now is about the power of our word and the power of our intention. And so many things come to me without intention, but it just seems right. So there is a mystery to everything, and I honor that mystery. And still, I want to find out more about myself, find out truly what, my authenticity is in this moment.
find out what my word is, what I want to create, and give a word to myself. Not so much to you, but I could give it to you too. Give a word to myself and learn that I can keep it, that I can keep that in my intention, and whatever my interest is somehow where my attention goes. And so then from that I'll just see what's needed or what's possible in this moment. Again, moment to moment awareness, moment to moment choice. And nowadays I'm choosing love and to honor somebody. Her name is Rena. And God, that's wonderful. So maybe I'll put a link where you can find Freefall. Check it out if you want. And thanks for listening. So, bye for now.